Adversaries are relentless, and they're only getting smarter, faster, and more sophisticated. Knowing their game is the only way to beat them. That's why we're here. Learn what it takes to protect against even the most sophisticated attacks. Welcome to the Adversary Universe podcast.
Well, this is the Adversary Universe. I'm Adam Myers, and with me is Tillmann Werner, one of the longest time CrowdStrike Intel going back to 2012. So we're here to talk about some geeky reverse engineering stuff, I think.
That's right.
Tillmann, you've been with the team since when?
2012,
Okay.
January 2012.
Came over from the antivirus world.
I came over from the antivirus world. I learned your name from my work contract, and you probably had no idea that you were hiring me.
Tillmann runs all things production for threat intelligence, and by, I think, all measures, an accomplished reverse engineer going back.
I would like to think so, yes.
Yeah. We still reverse engineer a lot of malware, even though we don't really see adversaries using malware for initial access. So let's talk about some cool malware we've seen recently.
Let's talk about some cool malware. Let's see. I like digging into old stuff and looking at older samples. There's still some unresolved questions and mysteries out there. So,
cold cases.
Cold cases, yeah.
Well, that's bad news for those adversaries.
That is bad news, yeah.
I think that's an interesting lead into the cold case stuff that we do and you've been an advocate of cold case. What was the program you called?
Well, we like to say we did cold cases before they were cool.
Yeah. That's a T-shirt waiting to happen.
That is, right? A T-shirt. Zero access case is one of them. But as analysts, it gets frustrating when you have to at some point close the file
right.
without success, right? I mean, you spend maybe weeks or months investigating something, and you're not really making progress. And at some point, you cannot really afford spending more resources, more time on the case. So then you close it and turn to something else. But that's obviously frustrating because, as investigative thinkers and analysts, we want to solve those cases.
It's interesting because I feel like every time, as good as the adversary's OPSEC is, right? In this case, there was clearly a commercial tieback, but as good as the adversary's OPSEC is, the longer that they operate, at some point they're going to make some sort of mistake. And that's where you swoop in and the team swoops in to capitalize on that. So it kind of, just a matter of time, I think, for that.
It is a matter of time. So what's interesting, we're all familiar with the defender's dilemma, of course, but when you think about these investigations, it kind of flips the script, right?
What's the defender's dilemma?
You know what the defender's dilemma is.
We have to be verbose here for our TV land audience.
Yeah, you're probably better suited to cite it here, but what it says is that as a defender, you have to be 100% right all of the time. But when you then slip up once, maybe that's sufficient for the attacker, for the adversary to get in. So
right.
That's the dilemma. Obviously, it is much more complicated to defend everything all the time.
The attacker only has to get lucky once.
Exactly.
But inversely,
when we're investigating an attacker, they only have to slip up once. And if we then find that information, maybe that's the clue that leads us to solving the case.
Leaving their commits in the binary.
Yeah, I was gonna come to that case that you, I think, are referencing here. So no, and I think that was the kind of the aha moment or the revelation. There was the frustration that I mentioned, but then also realizing that the more time we spend on a case, the higher the chance that we find this one clue, and even better, we can go back and look at historic data using new methodologies. So the analogy that we like to use here is, I guess the most popular one or well-known one is DNA analysis, like from criminal forensics, where people knew that this would be like a commodity, like capability for law enforcement at some point. So they already started collecting samples.
Right.
And then when this capability was available, they were able to solve cases that happened 10, 20 years ago.
Right. And then everybody starts voluntarily giving over their DNA for 23andMe and stuff like that. And all of a sudden there's massive databases of things to tie it back to.
And there's that too, yeah, of course. But I guess my point is the collection of data, even though you might not be able to exploit it right away, but in the future you might, is a very powerful thought. And we're seeing this across the board. So we actually looked at, what do you think are the big data sources in your mind? I mean, it's malware analysis, right? Like a malware repository. What else?
DNS records. Broad code sets, so not compiled, malware, but I think in that example that you gave, where they were using the same peer-to-peer library, right, and then they used it for commercial application. But I think we also could potentially find Git repos and things where adversaries have committed code into a Git repo because they thought it was a cool way to store their data, and then we're able to kind of find a string or find a piece that lets us tie it back to that Git repo, and then you find the committer's name, and you can work backwards from there. Or what was the Venomous Bear one with they weren't using Git, they were using
CVS in the beginning, and then SVN.
SVN, yeah,
the subversion.
Yes.
Code control tool. Maybe we can spend a few minutes on that later on. But this set of data sources is growing all the time, of course, right? And people are scanning the internet now. Back in the day, this was next to impossible. Way too complicated. But now, with higher bandwidth and more powerful computers, you can do that. I mean, you can scan a TCP port in under an hour
of the whole internet
wide, and things like that. So
banner matching and stuff like that's also really powerful.
In the late 2000s, around maybe 2008, people started amassing this data. They started building malware repositories. Census was founded. Aristotle with Yara. Passive DNS was invented in 2004 and then made public in 2005 and so on. And then a commercial company was started that did that and so on. So all these data repositories started to manifest, and now this data is available for us for analysis.
Right.
And if somebody has committed a cybercrime in 2004, they probably didn't have I need to protect myself against a passive DNS investigator.
Right.
In their
they can't future-proof their OPSEC. Is the challenge there. So in your mind, what are some of the cold cases that stand out for you? One for me, there was a GOSI variant. I remember right when we first started CrowdStrike, there was an email list that was talking. I think it was GOSI, and they were talking about it, and I was like, it's commodity malware or something like that. And somebody was like, no, it's not. And I was like, I never got an answer as to why, and it kind of always stuck with me that there was more to whatever that was. I thought it was GOSI or something like that.
Yeah, maybe you have a better memory than I do, but there's tons of cases. There's crimeware cases that are interesting.
So what's your top one?
So there are solved ones.
Because you were behind Lynx, right?
That is one on the list.
That was the big one.
Lynx,
Sleepy Lynx.
Yeah, that is. Do you want to provide a quick summary?
Sleepy Lynx was from a case in Georgia where it was related to the country. Thank you, very European specification there, not the state. But there was a case in Georgia, the country, where during an election process, I think there was malware detected on one of the candidate systems, and we kind of found it, and that was probably 2011, 2012 maybe.
2012,
real early.
Yeah.
And I don't think we ever got any closure to it until 2016 or so, 2017. I think you instantiated your cold case squad and ran that to ground. But I'm sure you probably have more details.
Yeah, that is one on the list of the unsolved cases. That one is particularly interesting, I think, because it was relatively technically advanced.
It was adversary in the middle, right?
It was adversary in the middle. They performed a man-in-the-middle attack and we were able to tell based on some network traffic that we had recorded.
Adobe update.
Exactly, yeah.
And had all of the hallmarks of a Swarm 2 kind of situation being used
or close access. I don't know, something like that. Yeah.
Hotel.
Yeah, antennas and stuff. So very interesting case. Obviously, also a politically interesting area. There was this one case, this one intrusion with some very interesting and advanced malware, and we haven't been able to tie it to anything else.
But we did eventually, right?
We were able to attribute it, but this one...
never saw it again?
We never really saw it again. Yeah.
It's always frustrating when you see a piece of malware and you're like, this is really interesting, and then it just disappears. You're like,
it's
out there somewhere.
Yeah, this is not the only one. There are other groups. We know that some groups like Cozy Bear, they keep reinventing themselves, so it's fairly standard that people lose visibility and then they discover them again. But then there are groups that completely disappear and everybody loses visibility and nobody. And if it's a state-operated actor, then it's fairly safe to assume that they are still, operating. They're still active.
Right.
We're just not seeing them anymore, and that's concerning sometimes.
I always wonder what happened to Magic Kitten.
Magic Kitten is one. Yeah, that one's interesting. And then on the eCrime side, there's Conficker, which is an interesting case from 2009.
Ooh, that's a throwback.
It is a throwback, but it was, I don't know, you probably remember it kept, people pretty scared for quite some time. Everybody thought like the internet would go down on this one day and so on. It's a very interesting case also technically, and it's not solved. I would like to know who was behind that.
What could we do to crack that case open, you think?
There are actually, because this is one of the ones that we looked at during our periodic reopening of cases, there are maybe one or two leads that might be worth exploring. But I think maybe the developers behind that, the operators, they were victims of their own success. The pressure was so high that maybe they said this is getting too hot, we're laying low, or we're not continuing this.
And sometimes those groups, they have infighting and then they split and somebody takes the code or something like that. So you never know what you're getting into from the personalities on the other side of the code, which is the human aspect of what we look at.
That is a very interesting element. And I think sometimes you can influence that. Sometimes you can wait until they have a fallout and somebody leaks code or chat logs or something like that, and then the case is essentially solved. People have been identified. But when that's not happening, you can maybe turn up the heat and increase the pressure a little bit by publishing a little information here and there.
A podcast.
The Europol endgame, they have what they refer to as blip element of their operations. They try to increase the pressure. It's almost like a PSYOPs campaign almost. And then sometimes people overreact, or they react, just in general, and that gives you another data point that you can investigate.
So you've got Conficker. What else you got on your list?
Well, do you want to talk about this Venomous Bear snake case? That's an interesting one.
I think that's a good one because Venomous Bear snake, that arguably goes back to the late 90s, right? Where Moonlight Maze and some of those early cases with the Russian intelligence services tie back to. And then we see, was it probably 2008 was the big incident where DOD had to literally, they were epoxying shut the USB ports on laptops so people couldn't plug in this USB stick that would deploy this Agent PTZ, which was really, I think, a piece of that framework, right?
It was. So what we track as Venomous Bear is also known as Turla, and then they have this one malware framework referred to as Snake or called Snake. But the actor, there are at least two clusters of activity that can almost be tracked separately. And one, we believe, is operating out of Moscow, Russia, and the other one is operating out of Ryazan, a town 2 hours south of Moscow. And Snake, we associate with Ryazan, whereas the other one, Agent BTZ, is the Moscow group.
Right.
But it's the same
agency.
Adversary or agency, and for the longest time, people had speculated that this is the FSB, the Federal Security Service in Russia.
They have extra, beyond just domestic authorities, they have authorities around the Commonwealth of Independent States and some external authorities, but obviously we've seen them targeting people within Russia from a eCrime perspective, or from a crime, I should say, perspective, right? Investigating things ranging from crime to religion to dissidents to journalists and things of that nature.
Exactly, yeah. And but they had this one element that I think was known in the usual circles for a number of years, which I guess can be described as like textbook cyber espionage, where they would go after the defense sector, embassies, like diplomatic entities and governments, ministries, and so on in the Western Hemisphere. But yeah, people have been tracking this. So we think that the group has been active in the modern form after Moonlight Maze since
2003?
2006, I think,
Okay.
was when the restructuring of the agencies in Russia happened. FAPSI, the SIGINT agency, was discontinued, and the SIGINT mission was given to other agencies, including the FSB, and that's when they started to operate.
And their headquarters was in Ryazan.
Well, the FSB headquarters is in Moscow, but
Right,
they were collaborating with the research
The
lab.
FAPSI headquarters, I thought, was in.
They had a dependency there, some office there.
I've seen the pictures.
Well, Ryazan has a university, a technical university, a radio state university or whatever it's called, where they had been teaching standard radio for 50 years, and they were closely associated with the FSB, and they said so, and I think they still do. They say that on their website. Some of the alumni from that university started, I guess, a research lab or a think tank, something like that, but a technical
radio club.
organization. A radio club focused on software development. So it was called Atlas, STC, Scientific Technical Center Atlas, and later on it was rolled up into some other FSUE, as they call them, Federal State Unitary Enterprise, which is a kind of public-private thing that I guess you would describe it as a defense contractor in the US. And they developed this Snake malware framework. But we didn't know that. People assumed that or speculated that for some time. We had lots of malware samples from the different intrusions. And there was a period where they left some interesting artifacts in the malware due to, I guess, a mistake that they made in the code that gave us handles of developers. So they used Vlad and Yurik and so on. There were, I think, 4
And that
or
was
5
all from subversion artifacts in the code.
Yes.
Yeah.
We didn't know, are these just 4-letter generic acronyms or whatever, or handles for people? Is there a one-to-one relationship between those handles and developers, or are they maybe used by groups of developers? We didn't know any of that. But then in a campaign, I want to say in maybe 2018, we discovered a second stage payload that was built in 2005, so before the restructuring in 2006, that had additional information in it. And that allowed us to tie this secondary payload to some person, Vladislav Goncharov.
So in 2018, they were using the same payload, or we found the payload in 2018?
They were still using it. It was a very special, specific payload for a specific purpose. I don't actually remember. I think it was something like passive fingerprinting of hosts on the network.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I was like passive SMB or something like that, I think, yeah,
something like that. If this was the one, they usually deploy multiple payloads. But then this was kind of, I mean, we've been compiling this puzzle for years and years, and not just us. I think everybody in the
world, yeah,
in the world, or
the Western
in the
world,
affected
world.
Yeah. And this was the missing piece to the puzzle, and then everything fell into place, and we were able to identify an individual, and it turns out that this Vlad.
Well, he had posted kernel code and stuff like that he had been working on, like, even before that, if I remember correctly,
Yes.
right? 2003, 2004. I thought there was some like Windows XP kernel code that had similar hallmarks to.
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, but once we started pulling on that thread, we discovered this kernel code and said, yeah, this makes sense. But it's difficult to hunt for that kind of stuff.
Right.
Even, I mean, you might say, okay, in 2003, 2004, how many people were there in the world who could write this quality of Windows kernel code? Probably not many, but it's still difficult to hunt for those, right, and then identify those. But when you have a lead and you pull on that thread, and it turns out that person that you're investigating is one of those kernel developers, then that's, of course.
And they just happen to be in a radio club in Ryazan. And
yeah, and then, I mean, it goes beyond that. The guy had friends with names that we were able to associate with the other handles. So it turns out that there is this probably fairly local group of computer security experts, hobbyists, that then also started a career in this field, and they worked together. One guy was operating the network infrastructure. Vlad was the core developer of this snake rootkit and so on. And so we were finally able to attribute that and kind of solve that case, and also prove the connection to the FSB, which was previously, assumed, but there was
High
no proof.
confidence, but not.
I wouldn't say high, but
It was assessed
moderate.
at some degree of confidence that it was FSB, but now we've got the smoking gun because their reason code from 2005 predates even, the Snake framework probably, and so we're able to tie that all together with a neat bow, and now we've got FSB high confidence.
Exactly, but the reason we were able to do this was because we still had the case open. We weren't really making any more progress.
Right.
It was analyzed, the Snake rootkit was understood. It wasn't actually even used anymore. They had switched to less intrusive, malware that wouldn't attempt to enter the kernel, which is increasingly getting harder and harder. But we still had this case open, and we kept looking at things and hunting for new leads, and that allowed us to finally solve the mystery.
That case is closed. How many cold cases would you say we have right now?
We have a library of maybe, a couple dozen, maybe 60 cold cases that we revisit sometimes. Obviously, everybody's busy, which makes it a little bit harder. But then also, when we thought about how to do this, we took inspiration from criminology, right? Agencies there have dedicated cold case squads. We don't have one, right? And maybe that is something that we can think about. Some of them do light duty analysis, so you get to do this temporarily or in order to support an investigation led by someone else. That's more along the lines of what we do. We keep reopening these cases and looking at them. A couple hours ago, I was looking at my list of case folders, and there's hundreds of them that I've collected over the years. Probably well over 50% of those are unsolved, right? And so there are lots of, granted, many of them are criminal, like crimeware cases, cybercrime cases, but many of them remain unsolved.
So you don't have a number one, the one that you open up your cold case folder on your computer and you're like, that one.
Well, Zero Access was one of those. That's kind of solved now. And some of the investigations that where I played a role, like Configure and so on, they keep interesting me. But then I guess you could say that Berserk Bear, which is an adversary that isn't very visible anymore, to say it like that, is a cold case. They're probably also still active. Where have they gone? Where are they? And that is one that is.
That was one that was kind of tangential to the FSB stuff, right? Because we saw them. This one takes me back because I think I passed you that DLL back in August of 2012, and that was what became Energetic Bear, and
Correct.
Then Energetic Bear kind of split into Berserk Bear, and I think it went in another direction too. But
yeah, maybe for the listeners, this is a fascinating, and considering that this was in 2012, this is nightmare material, I would say, right? Because it was software that would run on wind turbines on the actual turbine, and that software was Trojanized by this adversary, Energetic Bear, and then rolled into Berserk Bear later on. So they could probably access those wind turbines and maybe, shut them off or break them, things like that. So if this would happen today,
them so they spin out of control or something.
Given the political tension and the situation today, this would be a big deal.
Yeah.
Today, but.
Yeah, imagine that going into the Ukraine conflict in 2022, right? When Acid Rain Wiper took out the Viasat stuff, and we had all of these things going on. If they had been able to weaponize wind turbines across Germany and stop Germany from providing support to Ukraine, that could have been a huge deal. So these do have geopolitical consequences beyond just the malware.
I got one for you since you asked. So and you tell me if this is targeted or a state-operated thing or criminal.
Like this game.
Yeah, this game. It's a Zeus variant. So Zeus is obviously this very famous Trojan crimeware kit that I think first emerged in 2005 and then was very popular. One of the first malware as a service programs. And in 2017, there was a special variant, and this was after the Game Over Zeus takedown, where the programmer behind it was identified and indicted and so on, and he was laying low. So 2 or 3 years after that, a new Zeus
You're talking
variant.
about Evgeny Bogachev.
Bogachev, yeah, correct. And 2 or 3 years after that, a new version was found in Ukraine, and not really outside of Ukraine, but in Ukraine it was spreading like crazy. That had a version number, an internal version number of 3 point something. And what's curious about that is that that version never existed. And so where did this come from? And what was also interesting was that this particular version had capabilities to search through files on an infected machine, I think record videos, take screen captures like RDP, like functionality and so on. So it was definitely something we thought that was built for information gathering, maybe you want to say intelligence collection, something like that.
Sounds like intel collection for sure, yeah.
Yeah, and that spread like crazy in Ukraine, and it was very noisy because what they did was they spun up new infrastructure constantly, hundreds of domains, IP addresses, redirected everything, all the command and control stuff all the time. So it was very noisy, but also very difficult to take down because they would keep doing that over and over and over every day.
How did it spread?
I don't think we identified that, or I don't remember, but
same thing.
Maybe email.
It harkens back to a case that predates CrowdStrike, when there was a series of game over Zeus infections targeting international government and law enforcement. And what was interesting is that it came in waves. And what would happen is they would deploy this Zeus, and I think it was a 2. Version of Zeus, which was, I think, in between Jabber Zeus and kind of traditional Zeus. And what was interesting was that it would hit a bunch of law enforcement and government targets, like they would target intelligence agencies and, very broad, targeting. And it was an email, and the email was subject related to something that somebody would be interested in. And then what this version of Zeus would do is it would pull down a Perl to exe, and it was effectively just spidering the drive looking for files that were PDFs or docs or anything office related, and it would FTP it out to a number of different FTP hosts. And
Rookie mistake.
Was that?
Rookie mistake.
Rookie mistake. And then the username and password was encoded in it as well. And then it would go away for a little bit, and then they would come back and use documents that were taken. Presumably, if you looked at the FTP server, perhaps you would have known that it was
illegal.
Which is illegal, so nobody would do that. But and then it would pull down. It would come in another wave with another file of interest that was taken, and we saw this happening quite a bit. And so it was clearly espionage looking and smelling, right? And I think while it was using an eCrime tool that was prevalent at the time, the intent and the targeting was vastly different than what we had typically seen from Zeus. And then that went away. So I wonder if this is a nation-state threat actor, presumably from Russia, using eCrime tooling and creating specific variants of that eCrime tooling to conduct espionage type missions.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of Russia today, but I think there are two different hypotheses here, right? I mean, maybe the developer collaborated with the government, when this happened, or then also when the Ukraine thing happened, or maybe because it was malware as a service, maybe some government agency became an affiliate of the program, but then they must have requested new features because the FTP stuff wasn't in the regular version, right? So,
well, so what it would do is, rather than pull down the injects, so like we're going to get a little bit nerdier here, right? But like back in the day, Zeus would do injects to try to steal information. And when this reached out for the second stage to pull down the injects, it didn't pull down injects. It reached out and it pulled down. So it was almost like somebody took the purpose-made eCrime tool, and then we're basically like, let's just reroute this over here and pull down this Perl to exe script, which, almost seems like, didn't you see this with, was it Saudi, where there was like a custom build that was for government use?
it wasn't Sality, but it was Danabot.
Danabot, that's what it was, yeah.
We blogged about that.
Yeah,
Like
Scully Spider. They had a specific, it was an affiliate program, and one of the affiliates was presumably Russian intelligence,
Yeah.
right? And so I wonder if there was like a Zeus affiliate program and one of the affiliates was Russian intelligence, and then they had some real lame intel collection that they built using Perl.exe.
It's a good way to do it because it gives you plausible deniability. I mean, it looks like a crimeware operation. And then, I mean, maybe the Perl script is shitty, the Perl.exe, but it gets the job done, presumably.
Right.
So, why build something more complicated? And, good luck if that's one of your cold cases, good luck solving that, because it looks like all the other Zeus stuff that's out there, except for maybe this one element. And I don't know, of course, when they only add one tiny little additional element, then it's less likely that they made a mistake.
That's one of the cold cases I think that I think about all the time is that particular Zeus one, because I remember it specifically was targeting, it started off, there was this thing called Project Grey Goose back in the day, which was like a bunch of InfoSec people trying to do like threat research, and it targeted them, and it used their report and then targeted other people with the report from this Project Grey Goose thing. Yeah, so it was definitely like, it was pretty close to the community, I'd say, from a cyber intelligence perspective.
Is this worth reopening? Is this worth investigating? I mean, maybe for our peace of mind, it's worth it. But
I kind of want to go fire up my laptop now.
it's definitely. I mean,
I haven't thought about it in years.
This was like this was the Niebuhr thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So this was in
Hillary Niebuhr,
2010 or something.
Yeah.
Or around that time, right? So there was no rich
shout out
hashing.
Alex Cox from NetWitness who did the Niebuhr botnet.
Yeah. So we didn't have rich data hashing at the time. There was no import hashing. PE hashing, I think, was just getting invented by Georg, our good friend and old colleague at the time. None of these tools existed. So now they're available, and we can take another look, a second look at those samples, and maybe we find another clue.
We should pull that Perl.exe file. I think I have it on a CD-ROM someplace
CD-ROM?
in my archives. So I'll have to go dig that out. And also a CD-ROM reader.
And a reader, yeah. I mean, maybe it's easier to just go to the...
It doesn't get any colder than that.
That's true.
Your number one cold case is Conficker, you'd say?
Maybe, yeah. That's definitely up there. Another one might be Duke, if you remember that one.
Duke.
So it's another curious. It's called it has a Duke name, which implies it might be Cozy Bear, another Russian agency, but it's not. So I think people
Mini Duke and
yeah, exactly. So it's from that time. This was also when was this? 2012, 2013.
Did it target IDA?
It had Italian strings in it, but it targeted, I think, entities in the Middle East.
Okay.
And it was like a one-off operation. We've never seen anything related, anything similar. So it's completely unattributed.
Sounds like classic Russian misattribution. Let's throw some strings in there to make it seem like something else.
I don't think we are able to say it's Russian.
Maybe we should crack this one open.
Completely different.
Well, maybe, and if anybody out there wants to suggest cold cases to us, hit us up on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever, and we'll throw it onto the pile, because who knows, maybe there's some cool cold cases we haven't even thought about.
That's a good one. I like that. Yeah, please nominate cases.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today, and this is we're live at Falcon Europe. I guess we didn't mention that, but we're out here at Barcelona, and looking forward to kicking off the event and meeting with some customers and talking about some cold cases. So thanks for coming out and joining us here.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you all for listening. And if there's any cold cases out there, definitely let us know. We'd love to hear about some malware that we need to be taking a look at and see if there's anything we can crack open. And look forward to seeing some more research from your team out here as well.
And shouts to Christian, who isn't here today. We miss you.
Christian Rodriguez, Field CTO of the Americas. He's not here.
It'll end up being a cold case.
Yeah, a cold case. All right. Well, thank you all.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to our podcast and head over to crowdstrike.com/adversaries to learn more about the many bad guys we track. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Adversary Universe podcast.